Hi there, and welcome back to the Community Strategy Podcast. My name is Deb Shell. I'm a creator turned community builder. After launching my online community in 2020, I have a passion for online events and bringing people together. I now consult business owners and leaders just like yourself who have a message, their life's work, or a vision for helping others transform through their online courses, cohorts, or memberships. On this interview style podcast, you'll hear conversations with community leaders, passion for bringing people together online. Our goal is to provide you with interesting conversations to inspire you to build, launch, and grow an online community with energy, confidence, and purpose. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Community Strategy Podcast. My name is Deb Shell. I'm the host here, and we talk all things community strategy. So welcome to the Community Strategy Podcast, Drew. So glad to have you. I've read a lot about Burb, which is the company you're here to talk about today, and how it helps people build relationships. So I'm excited for you to share a little bit about you with us.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Deb. And thanks to all the listeners and viewers out there.
Yes. Awesome. So tell us a little bit about where did this all start for you? How did you enter into what is called the community space?
Yeah, I would say, going way back, I was a director of product and employee number 60 at Yammer. Yammer for us internally, we always thought about it as like a productivity tool. It's where we talked about projects. It's where we talked about the work that we were doing. But always when we were implementing it within companies, we got this like feature list that never really made any sense to us about like understanding, engaging, and frequently we were selling to the corporate communications teams. So fast forward a number of years, then, really in lockdown, I was in the On Deck Founders Fellowship with Danielle Maville, community guru, built the community team at Etsy and BarkBox before Airbnb and Lyft. And Danielle really helped me kind of reconceptualize that experience and show me, hey, you were actually building a community tool for inside companies. And the feature list wasn't weird. You were thinking about your product in the wrong way. So if you just like change your mindset a little bit, that feature set's actually really applicable and really useful. And, when we're working with companies the size of Deloitte, like, massive scale of bringing people into those Yammer networks. How do we communicate with them? How do we build community? And then really from there, from On Deck, then we're looking for applications of that. Like, okay, now I have this idea. I have this concept of what people need as they build community. Where are the different most interesting places to apply that? And where we found kind of the most interesting trend for us was this concept of creators, these educational creators who are building, they've got a YouTube channel. They've got 1,500 viewers of their YouTube channel, not a massive audience, but, they're teaching something that's really, really valuable. And these folks would, they're not going to make a ton of money off of ad revenue, but their fans would be more than willing to pay them for their expertise in a smaller environment, pay access, pay to get one-on-one mentorship. And those folks, whether they know it or not, I think the more advanced folks realize it, but they're building communities. The earlier on folks, they're just like, well, it's 5 people in a WhatsApp group. So really, how do we help this audience that realize that they're building communities, scale their efforts, build community, and then keep building into these kind of sustainable businesses?
I love that, helping them realize that they are building communities. It's such a great point because I think not everybody thinks about, and, if you think about it, I don't know what your thought is on this, but I have the experience of I've got lots of books and I can read a lot of books, or I can take a course, and I've taken lots of courses. The challenges are, I think there's like lots of statistics out there that say we don't always finish them. We might show up and start strong, but not finish strong on courses that we take online. And I think that goes to say that when we do it together with other people, we have a better experience. And so helping cultivate that connection of people who are learning something and how they can learn together. It sounds like that's kind of what your tool is supportive in doing, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think the industry success rate for asynchronous courses is something in the range of like 3 to 5%. I'm somewhat contrarian in that because like sometimes maybe you got what you needed out of that 3 to 5%, but at the same time, like if your goal is transformation, if it's to go from one place to another, and especially something that we saw during, kind of peak pandemic, it was reskilling, changing jobs and careers completely, then, I think the fastest way and the best way to get there is with other people. It's, building community, helping those folks kind of along their journey, matching them up to people who are in that same point in their lives and can actually, go from point A to point B.
And your platform is called Burb.
Yep. Called Burb, based on the idea of these sort of smaller communities that can orbit.
I've lived in a couple burbs. I've lived in I've lived in burgs with a G is what I keep thinking of. So I've lived in Pittsburgh and I've lived in Harrisburg. But it reminded me of a local newspaper that we have here called the Burg, and in Pennsylvania where I'm based, and it's a great little paper, but it shows you that there's so much local stuff happening that people don't know about, and thankfully there's this little monthly magazine that's published that tells you about, here's the interesting things that are happening in Harrisburg. And I think that what you're talking about is we don't need to have these large spaces, and sometimes it's really cool what the magic that can happen in with a couple people, with some people, and also and in the improv world, and of saying, and we also struggle as creators, right? There's just so many statistics right now about creators and the creator economy and how people are really taking this idea of I have an idea and I want to create something and then monetize it. And I think Teachable and platforms like this have been really successful at helping entrepreneurs and business owners and creatives do that. But there's a missing link, right? There's like people who are like, yeah, this is great. I can teach all of these amazing things I've learned. But then what happens next is the question, I think.
Yeah, fun fact, my mom's actually from McKeesport, so maybe I have some of that Burg DNA as well.
There you go.
maybe that's the inspiration. Yeah, what we saw was like there were so many people doing this. Like I've got content I'm dropping into a Slack channel. I've got Teachable and I've hooked it up to Circle, and now I've got a ConvertKit thing. And we're like, what is the missing piece here is the how. It's not the like tool necessarily. It's the orchestration of all these things together that produce the result for the member. And so, eventually, you look at folks who've done this at scale, who've been really successful, programs like a Notion Mastery or an SPI or, building a second brain or something like that. These folks eventually figured it out. They built teams, they, figure everything out on Zapier. They just kind of, through intuition and hard work, made it from, that early stage to the later stage. And the thought for us was like, how do we just make that easier? How do we lower that bar to success? And really a lot of it, what it does look like is just like a Zapier that knows what you're doing. That says, okay, you're trying to do this. You're trying to create connection between your members. Like, here's a template to go do that, rather than like going and reinventing the wheel every time. And then eventually the system learns from all the different people connecting to it, and the templates get smarter and smarter and better, and it just gets easier and easier to run these programs. And then really the specialness comes from you, the creator, your content, your teaching ability, and we help with the connection and kind of all the day-to-day operations.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the use cases. Like, how would somebody use this in an example for like a course creator who has a either a course. I know that it looks like some partners are Teachable and Circle and Slack. I think those were the three that I saw on the website. I don't know if you work with any other partners or integrations, but those were the three that I saw.
Yeah, we think about it, kind of the full life cycle of the member coming into a membership community, one of these community powered courses that might be an annual membership. You just keep paying as long as you keep growing with the community. Others like a cohort based course, which is super time boxed. But we think about the moments that your member has in relationship to your community. Like, first is, for us, it's always onboarding, and that's always kind of the tip of the spear for a lot of our clients. It's like, bring the person in and make sure they've got a great initial experience. I'm obsessed with this sociological study I read a long time ago that said, if you want people to talk in a meeting, get them to introduce themselves. And that part of the justification of the concept behind that is like, when you hear your voice in a room, you get used to hearing your voice in a room, and you're going to be more likely to use it later. So by just like providing a really solid onboarding, getting people to introduce themselves, getting them oriented to the space, you create space for that person to then go and continue to use their voice and to engage and to keep following on with other pieces. So that's kind of the first step is onboarding. And we do a lot there. We'll integrate with type forms. If you have like an onboarding survey that says like, who are you? Tell us about yourself, your goals and stuff like that. We can then use that to then customize their experience, tailor, tag the member, use that to segment messages later on. Then we think about, check-ins, like in a cohort-based course, that's quick. It's, a month or two max. So you want to have check-ins kind of in a public channel and a private channel, just every few weeks, make sure you're checking in with the person. Are you getting what you wanted? Is this experience meeting your expectations, to make sure that you've got that point of feedback. So often what you'll see in a cohort-based course is there are a bunch of people who sign up and just realize they didn't have time, and they'll figure that out in like the first 2 weeks. And so one of the best things you can do as a cohort-based course creator is to let them move on to the next cohort. Okay, cool, we're running this again in 6 months, like let's get you in there. And that builds just an endless amount of positive affinity from the member. They're going to love you and rave about your course and your support forever. But it's one of those things that's just so easy to just miss if you don't check in with people.
Oh my goodness, yes. So valuable. You pulled out, I'm just going to point out a few things, but onboarding is the biggest thing that I think a lot of people struggle with. And it is the biggest thing that I feel like makes the community successful. Like if you have a really good onboarding implementation strategy, then community members will feel like they can say hi and introduce themselves, and if they're encouraged to do so, and also comment later. So I think those are great points to say. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then after that, it's kind of the long term. Then if you've got a longer term community, one that sticks around for a year, it's a membership. Then you want to check in with people kind of over time, and I think that's where it starts to actually look a lot more like a SaaS subscription business than it does. When you think about there are individual moments of connection and community that are going to come from Zoom meetings, that are going to come from content and jam sessions and stuff like that. You can layer all those in. But you'll want to check in, on a regular basis, see how people are doing, their likelihood of renewing, whether they're getting what they wanted. And I was just talking about this today with Rosie Sherry, is like, I think it's super healthy, especially in the educational community, to graduate people. Like when they've met their goals, like cheer them out the door. That's, they've gotten what they needed, what they wanted. I think we probably don't do enough of that in the community. We probably just try and hold on to people as much as possible.
Good points. Yeah. Celebrations along the journey are really important, I think, from beginning, middle, and end. I definitely know that feeling of, I just signed up for 3 different programs in the same 2-week span, and realized then I'm like, oh, I'm doing all of these now. So how am I fitting this into my life? And I think the things that I've recently just really learned from other hosts or other, community builders, is that they assume we all have 24 hours in a day, and we only can do so many things with those hours. And part of those hours is spent sleeping and spending time with our friends or family. And then the rest of it is our work life. And so if you're talking about an 8-hour or 10-hour workday, hopefully you're not working more than 10 or 12, like 10 hours or more. But like that really limits you to like what time you do have to dedicate to learning and education and upskilling, or, all of these different things. And so the opportunity that you just mentioned earlier about having them be able to join a different cohort is a big deal. I think that that's an opportunity for somebody to say, as a creator, if you're like selling a timed membership and people are like, this sounds great, and they sign up, and then they have that, 2 days later, they're like, oh my goodness, I've just overcommitted myself incredibly bad, and now what am I going to do? Having that opportunity to say, you know what, if you feel like super overwhelmed right now, we have another cohort that starts in 3 months or whatever, and you can we can apply you to that one instead, and then you have some time to build it into your life. And I think those opportunities and having that, giving more flexibility to people, is certainly going to help them. There's things said for like, it starts today and you have to sign up by certain times for sales tactics, and that's all. Those are ways, directions to go. But I think after the last couple years, everybody's had a lot of stuff happening, like heavy stuff. And so whatever can make it easier, whatever can make it more fun, and whatever can make it like low lift. I think those are the key things that we're looking at, in the next year and talking about 2023, excited to see, how all of these tools are going to work together, but it's not about the tools. You talked about moments, and I love that idea of it's about moments. What other moments do you feel like your tool really supports besides the onboarding? I know you mentioned that one.
I think there are celebrations of progress, and progress can look like a lot of different things. It can look like, individual success in their own businesses. It can look like progress within, a course structure within Teachable. It can look, like, people having a, kind of a breakthrough within their own work, posting their work, talking about their work. So, celebrating progress and success, is a huge part of it. There's also, the flip side of it, especially over the past few years, checking in with people. If it's something that's way too obvious and common that'll happen. And, if you're building a community, is like, oh, I haven't seen Bob around in a while. Like, what happened to Bob? So we, build a lot around, templatizing check-ins on that basis. So one of our most popular features actually will go outside of the community. And if somebody hasn't been around, if they haven't logged into Circle, Slack, Teachable, Discord, whatever in a while, sends them an email, just like, and it comes from the creator's email inbox and just checks it and like, hey, I haven't seen you around in a while. And the response rate to that email is massive. It's like 60-70%. And what you'll almost always hear, and like I could probably just write this whole email exchange for them, is something came up. Like I've had a personal issue, I haven't been able to engage, but like if you write that, if that check-in has a ton of empathy, recognizes that person, likely has life events that are keeping them away, like you've now built such a strong bond with that person. You're able to care for them. Imagine, somebody has a life event and you send them a gift basket or send them some flowers or something like that. Like imagine that was a conversation that never would have happened before, and now you've just turned that into such a positive experience for that person, that like you just keep building that relationship, connecting them back to the overall community.
Yeah, and celebrations and life events happen, right? So I think I just recently talked to Jazz June. I don't know if you're familiar with Jazz June. They're in beta right now. It's another platform for community builders that are doing course creation. And he was talking about one of the things that they said was they have certifications and they have quizzes, which is really nice, like in the platform. I think those functions and features are really nice to like give students, like to validate that they're learning, and also to say and to celebrate with a certification at the end of saying, hey, you're certified now for this, or you've have certification of completion or whatever, especially if it's like learning for jobs or profession, because that there's another thing you can add to your LinkedIn profile or your resume or whatnot, right? I think those are great points to add.
Yeah. If you're familiar with Dan Pink and Drive, his kind of three things of motivation, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Like the person's already coming in with a lot of autonomy, like they've made the decision to come in and do this. Mastery, if you can show them, hey, you are progressing in this thing, and sometimes it, that progress doesn't necessarily even feel like progress. They're learning stuff, but they have a hard time because they're not experts in the field, like recognizing their own progress. If you help them celebrate that progress, like show them, hey, here's what you did that week, like it just there's a kind of mental switch there. And then purpose ultimately comes back to the the alignment around the value of the individual's values and the values of the membership and the course itself, and really that the things that you're teaching, the values that your membership espouses, are the things that they believe in, are the kind of the common goals that pull them all together.
Right. Yeah. And it's so powerful to just have the ability to utilize these tech tools like yours and have it be an intentional way of connecting. I really, really like the the story you just shared earlier about, people go through life challenges and deaths in the family and whatever, like all kinds of things, right? And just having somebody reach out and just say, hey, we missed you, it might be a really big thing to that person. And so I think using that as a low lift way for the creator to reach out can actually be a really impactful thing. Sometimes automation seems very clunky and it's not very friendly or warm and fuzzy. Warm and fuzzy aren't the first things I would think of when I think of automation, right? Or hugs, but if I could send you a virtual hug and, and it might not be appropriate for business depending on what kind of courses you're teaching, but what what I mean, but just having the ability to share a little compassion there, and checking back in on them. I think those are ways we can intentionally use tools and not spamming people about marketing, but actually having a meaningful purpose to connecting with them, such as, we've missed you, and is there anything we can do to make sure you succeed here, or maybe you just need more time and then you can join our next cohort. Maybe that's the offer, maybe that's the conversation, is if something came up, we want to make sure that you get the best out of this course. And so we can happily invite you to the next cohort or whatnot. So I think those are ways to like bring all of that together as we were talking about the different elements.
Yeah. The way we think about it is like, there's a certain set of things that like, you should be doing. But especially, community builders can only scale so much. When you get to a community of 50 people and your communication now needs to be 1 to 50, it's really, really hard. Like if you've ever seen like the n squared graph of all the telephones pointing to each other, the number of like nodes you need to communicate with grows exponentially. So your ability to like meaningfully interact with all of these folks just becomes harder and harder and harder the bigger the community grows, and even adding more people won't necessarily resolve that challenge, because it's an exponential problem. So 2 community leaders isn't necessarily going to help significantly when it's n squared number of members. So the way we think about it is like, the automation is the beginning. Like, we take care of all the stuff you should be doing but just don't have time to get done, kind of adding additional capability to you. And then everything after that just allows you the opportunity to be more human, to spend that time that you would have spent going and sending 500 DMs to like then follow up. And that follow up, like we've been talking about, is just like 10 times more valuable than the initial outreach, which you just haven't had time to do.
Yeah. And talk about burnout of like going and sending direct messages to like 500 people. That does not sound like a fun Thursday afternoon for me.
Oh, the horror stories I've heard. Some of them involving, we pay a team of 100 people to go download all the messages in Facebook groups and sort them by who sent them and the sentiment and stuff like that. The company spends thousands of dollars. Another one was, we spend like a full workday, 3 of us every single week, just like downloading Slack and then analyzing the data behind the Slack message. I'm just like, what are you getting out of that? How can I get you to insights faster? And then even beyond that, how can I get you from insights to action faster than, those crazy manual processes of data gathering and number crunching that ultimately it's, even harder to connect them to action.
It's a good point about metrics, though. Business owners are looking for metrics. They want numbers and they like numbers. And it's hard to, put numbers on what community, the power of community is hard to put into numbers. What do you see as is helping address some of those concerns maybe some people have around analytics?
I would say I'm a bit of a contrarian on this one, because my tenure as a startup executive, I think the average tenure of a CMO is like 18 months. And when I think about why CMOs get fired so often, it's because of their numbers. Like their whole role is to try and justify their jobs based on their spend, because marketing is one of the most expensive parts of any company. And so there's this huge operation within marketing to say, okay, this dollar equals this, this dollar on the outcome. But all of it is correlation. Like there's no absolute way. And any marketer worth their salt is going to tell you that, like, we can't tell you exactly where that lead came from because we touched that lead 15 different times. The salesperson called them, they saw an ad, they signed up for our newsletter. Like, which of those got them to buy? We don't know. And I think ultimately at the lack of attribution is the thing that gets CMOs fired, and the inability to like draw hard lines, because it's really easy for a CFO or a data smart person to be like, well, that doesn't work. That's not a real number. Like, it's just too easy and it's too squishy. So I think if you take a step back and look at brands that are trying to be community led and help, community led, I think you're now talking a set of metrics that's even squishier than
the official term squishy will be the headline of this podcast.
Squishy data and activation.
Squishy community strategies.
And so we've always thought about, like, we don't want Burb to be optional, and I don't like building tools that a CFO can come in and just be like, well, that doesn't make sense, and strike that line at them. One of the reasons we didn't focus initially on brands, although we've increasingly had brands coming and chatting with us. We wanted to focus on businesses that were not just community led, but community first. Like, the community was their product. It's the thing that they were selling that everybody wanted to get out of them. And that led us, I think, to courses, led us to memberships, and such that, like, data is important now for our members in informing how to better operate a community first business. But it isn't like, we've got XYZ number of leads in there, and those leads converted at blah, blah, blah rate. Therefore, community is okay, and we get to hire more people. Like, no, that's gross. I don't like that. And I think it's just too brittle, too easily doubted by a CFO. Even if it is 100% true and accurate, it's just too easy for somebody to come and pick those numbers apart. So yeah, we really focus. That's why we've really, zeroed in on community first businesses who get it. They're going to keep investing in it. Like, the numbers don't justify the expense. They tell you how to do it better.
Is there any clients that have really, that you feel like really succeeded in that of, using your tool of reaching out and growing a community, and how did that go? Maybe if there's an example you could share.
Yeah. We just have a testimonial coming out with a company called Notch. They have kind of it's a brand community. But it's a community of practitioners around the product. And it was a quiet community. It had gone somewhat dormant, all on Slack. They have sort of luminaries in there. They've got other practitioners in there. They started using Burb for onboarding, for re-engagement, for kind of bulk messaging. Used kind of all these different templates, and they basically doubled the number of active members over during the free trial period of using Burb. So it was just really, really easy for them. At that point, it was kind of a no-brainer that they would continue using Burb. So that was really cool. Others, I think we tend to work with in sort of a proto state. I think the place where we succeed the best is often from, like, when people are when they're about to go for that 50-person cohort, when their community is really growing rapidly, and maybe they're going to layer on a membership on top of something else that they already had, helping them figure out all the different operational pieces, kind of the what's next. Okay, cool. I was able to do this really easily at 10 people. Now, how do I do it easily at 50? How do I do it at 100? How do I scale relationships up to 1,000?
Right. I think that's, and thank you for adding that up to 1,000. I think that's good to just say, like, there's so many great tools out there, but like, what makes yours different, it sounds like, is that you're really focused on, like, somebody who's got some really great momentum with something, and now they're like, okay, this has worked, but now how do we make this bigger or better, or involving more people, bringing more people in, and working with more. So I love the one to many is a great space, because I think we're so taxed on time that as a creator, it sounds really, really appealing. I think the challenges lie within, validation, and that's up to the creator to really get validation for their community concept, and putting their community strategy together, and those beginner stage, community builders are probably going to have to, do it themselves quite a bit to really understand like what is going to fit best for them and their model. But like once you get to the next stage, then it sounds like your tool would be a great fit for a lot of people that might be listening. So thank you for sharing that. What's next for the next year? What are you excited about for 2023? Is there any community trends that you want to shout out or call out that you're excited about?
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing that we continue to be excited about ultimately is the idea of, creators building membership communities. And I think that's been the trend that we've been leaning into, and it just seems to keep growing and getting more, more popular, whether that's, I think it's been buzzword bingo over the past 2 years of cohort-based courses, community-powered courses, whatever. Like, to me, it's, humans learning stuff, putting them together. I think that's, and then driven by creators who have some kind of like real expertise. It continues to be kind of really exciting for us. And I think what we're seeing in our user base is these becoming multifaceted, sustainable businesses. I started with a cohort and now I'm adding a membership. I started with, membership, and I'm evolving it into, and then I'm layering on, additional educational content. And I think that's, for me, most of the really exciting stuff happening in communities actually happening in these like smaller sort of memberships. And I think you can see, products like Circle evolving in that direction. They're helping people build these sort of multifaceted things, and we can continue to be sort of the layer that helps people orchestrate that work.
Mm-hmm. And not every community needs to be 100 people or 1,000 people. In fact, some really amazing community stuff happens when groups of 5 or 10 or 15 people get together. So I think it's lovely it's refreshing, I would say, to hear somebody talking about the small group leaders, like people who are doing, even people who are doing meetups. That's what makes me think of as like these people who just, I've talked to a lot of people that started with meetups and now they're growing, but like it takes time to grow. And so you need a spaces and to keep conversations going between events and those kinds of things. So I think it's hard to do that, and any way to make it an easy lift and easy access is super helpful. And creators are like booming this year. The last couple of years, just seen such a trend for all of this, the space for creators. There's challenges, but lots of opportunity, I think, too. Yeah.
Yeah. Stuff we're really excited about. Like, I think about these in kind of like 3 different phases. In the early phase, you've got a coaching business, you've got an additional, original idea. Like you're saying, it's like that discovery period. What do people care about? What are they interested in coming together to talk about? Like, there's a whole like research phase here. And so many of these folks are, don't think of themselves as a community. It's like, I run a coaching business and they put those 5 people in a WhatsApp group. Like, that to me, that person doesn't necessarily name that thing community, but like, okay, that they're building community in some level. Next is like, folks who have gotten bigger, they're growing, they're hitting growing pains, they're reaching kind of the ends of their own, their own capacity, and they're like, verging on burnout. That's when I like, if I could like jump in and help people, that's right before they hit burnout is when I want to help them. And then they're the kind of big, super successful program. So I think we tend to fit in that middle zone of helping them get from the middle to the successful program. And I think what we really want to focus on over the next year is like these early folks. We can't necessarily help with validation. We can train, we can teach. That was one of the first things I nerded out about, is that community validation looks a lot like product validation. I was like, oh, I get this. I know these tools. I know how to talk to people like this. But there's a lot of like early stage stuff. Like, they get hung up on tools really, really easily. And yes. I need a landing page. I'm going to go to WordPress. Oh, and WordPress doesn't have this thing. I'm going to go over to Squarespace. Oh, I don't need that thing. Like, then I figure out my billing product. Like, that is a thing I think we can help with, is just getting people kind of off that tool merry-go-round. And that's an area we'll probably be looking into pretty soon.
Oh, I love that, because the biggest thing that I see that hangs people up is the tools and the technology. I think, what I really love working with people. And so if you're stuck in that ideation mode, that's what I do. I do work with strategy of like getting clear on your community concept. What does that look like? Okay, great. We know the community concept. We know who we're bringing together. We know why. Great. Now, what does that look like? How are we inviting people? Are we, bringing them in the door this way and all of that stuff? But that's where some people get so, and I think sometimes technology platforms make it even more confusing with the layering of stuff. And so if you are like, your platform is super easy to understand and like not hard to figure out, it seems, and there's templates. I mean, I'm not a customer, but it sounds like from my research, pretty easy. You're not going to get stuck in a lot of loops of like that whole system of, okay, I'm going to do a WordPress website. Now I do this. Now I need a plugin for this. Now I'm 17 layers into WordPress and I'm on the phone with Bluehost for 3 hours to figure out my challenges around this now. And I still haven't talked to anybody. And like, I see that all the time. And it sucks to be in that space. And what I typically tell people is, let's eliminate all of those barriers and let's just talk. Because what you said earlier was, we want to talk to people. This is a community. We're talking to people. So let's just talk to people. We don't need a 17-layer system to talk to people. We just need to have the concept, to have your idea and to know how you want to share it with somebody and to get them on board with your idea. And that's just talking to people. And that's when I talk about validation, it's really doing these ideal member interviews. And I do a lot of work there because I think it's the first thing people skip. They jump right to what's the platform and what's the tech solution. And what really is helpful is to know your members. But like using your tool now, when you know your members, you can actually, use it intuitively to say, all right, I know, the X and X is happening. And so now I can like build systems around it, right? To be able to have like a more intentional and strategic plan for your content creation and for your member onboarding and engagement strategies. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I'm in all these, creator communities of folks who are building memberships and courses, as you can imagine. And yeah, they'll be talking about their tech stack for 6 months and like, cool, when are you launching? Like, when is the thing going to be available? And could you have done that with PayPal? Like, could you have just lowered the bar? And a lot of them will think, I think they'll then feel defeated by the technology, where a person who's been working in technology for almost 20 years, I'm like, that's a pretty technical deep dive you did on that product. Like, you've really looked at like the feature sets one by one, but it was not required. You didn't have to do that. Like, you could have just, here's a straightforward thing. So that's, yeah, we'll be building something kind of for that launch moment to really get people out of that getting stuck on the tools and like, cool, use this, get unstuck, move on, build your thing. And like, we probably won't even put the word community on it because that might scare them even early on. It'll probably really be related to, memberships, coaching, and really just get the thing going.
Yeah. It's so funny you saying about, I had experience with this with WordPress and Bluehost because that was the rabbit hole I went down. And I was on a call with the Bluehost guy, whatever, like to call them and ask them about this one thing that I was stuck on. And even he was like, oh, this is like really advanced. Like, I don't know. And I'm like, I called you because you're supposed to know the answer to that. And it's just yeah, it feels very, I think I resonate with what you're saying there. It feels very defeating as a creator who just wants to do this thing, but like it seems like that thing is like impossible to get to because there's 7 layers between me and that thing. And how do we cut the cord? Basically, I'm just saying we don't need all of these shiny objects basically. And how do we get to what's the goal and how can we get there faster? And I think anything that has that kind of connotation around it is going to be interesting and attractive to people, especially in the creator space in the next year, because there's only so much time and bandwidth we have. There's there's so much that we can do. And I think at least for me, the less involved I have to be around building those tech systems in the back end and the more time I get to spend with people, is going to make me happier. So I appreciate that. And even now you're making me feel like good, because I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'm overthinking what I'm trying to do right now with my business. So it's like, it just reminded me about, like, I was just earlier today on my website, like, I hate my whole website. It really needs a whole entire redesign. And I'm like, is that really what it needs? Like, do I really need to do all of that work? I don't know. It's a good question.
I mean, yeah, I'm a product person, so I feel that. I'm like, oh, if we just had this thing like slightly better. But kind of the big product philosophy, and thankfully our CTO brings me down to earth a lot, is, if the core concept is good, people are going to put up with a little bit of jank to get what they need. And so it's the same for product. It's the same for websites. Like if the copy stands out, if the thing works, they're going to put up with bugs. They're going to put up with, not everything being super smooth from one to the other, because, there's so much value that they're seeing out of the thing. And so it's something I have to remind myself about. And I'm sure it's not true for everybody else.
The message is what's important, not the method.
Yep.
Necessarily we want to make sure that if their message is attracting them, then that's what's going to keep them to stay, even if it's a little jagged in the beginning. If the experience isn't super streamlined, that's okay, because guess what, if you're just starting out and you're doing your first 2 cohorts, are you just starting out, guess what, that's actually how it works. It's kind of how you learn what you like and what you don't like. It's people want the shiny perfect thing, but the answer is life isn't shiny or perfect. Humans are certainly not shiny or perfect, and so our websites are probably not going to be shiny and perfect either all the time.
Yeah, I joke that I'm both the best and worst person to run support, because I take every bug like a personal failing. I will fight really hard to get bugs fixed for customers, but also the worst because I just oh, good, that wasn't perfect. Their experience.
Yeah, that's a good point to say that, as community builders are really those nurturing people. That's why in the community profession, it's dominated by women. It's the only industry besides nurses and those kinds of professions that I know of, in the tech, I don't know of any other tech field that's dominated by women other than community. And they're not to say that there's anything wrong with men, but I'm just saying the sentiment of what you were talking about was really being compassionate and caring. And no matter if it's a business or if it's a personal conversation, you care. And that shows in your dedication to wanting people to succeed. And that's a valuable trait to have. And not everyone has that. So community builders have that kind of innately within them, typically, of they want people to get the thing or solve the problem. And I was just having a conversation. You can't. And I was just having this conversation. Also, as a coach, you have to step back and be like, I can't want it more than they do. I can't, they've got to want to do the thing. I can't want it and magically they're going to do it. It's they have to want to do it.
Yeah, I love when I'm responding to a customer support ticket and I write a paragraph of stuff and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. That's such a terrible thing. And they're like, cool. I'm like, okay. Cool. Let me know when it's fixed. Oh, all right. Maybe it's not that big of a deal.
Good. But that maybe somebody really appreciated that. So it's also good to have empathy. I think no matter what, empathy is always a good thing to show. We're sorry for your struggle. We hear you. We're getting it resolved. Yeah,
that's my father-in-law is a media trainer for crisis events. And I think his media training is a little bit different from a lot of other folks, that he's apologize. That's the first thing at the gate. Say sorry. And that you're going to try and do better. It's if you stonewall too much, if you doubt people, you throw up too many walls, you don't give them the ability to interact with you. You're trying to deflect, and that just makes them angrier, and it just gets worse and worse. But if you start with "I'm sorry," it just gives you a ton of latitude to go and take the time to go fix that thing later.
Some lawyers might disagree with you. Is that is acknowledgement of guilt?
Yeah,
I've been watching a lot of court drama on my off days, but I would say, yeah, of course. I think when mistakes are happening, that you own up to this is important. But I also feel just empathizing by saying, I'm sorry you're feeling that way. Even if it's not anything to do with me, but you're feeling a certain way, you can always say, I'm sorry you're feeling that way. I'm hearing you. I think a lot of times, especially myself, I know we're wrapping up, but we like to jump into here's the solution.
Yeah.
And not everyone wants a solution. Some people, and one of the biggest magical things about community, just because I like to talk about community, I'll share this, is that people love to be heard and seen. And so if you have an opportunity to be able to do that as a community builder, and tools help you do that, use the tools, but use them intentionally is what I always say.
Yeah. And a big part of vulnerability gives people the space to step in too. It gives them the opportunity to then say, okay, well, if you say, something I believe in a lot about as being a leader is like admitting mistakes, admitting what you don't know, talking about what you don't know, because then other people get the opportunity like, well, hey, I do know that thing. I can help you out. And that leads to better outcome, leads to stronger teams, leads to stronger communities. I'm just a firm believer that, vulnerability brings everyone up a level and gives people the opportunity to kind of be better together.
Yeah, and community in general, when you're talking about like building these relationships inside an online community, asking for help is hard when you don't know people. So like when you're talking about like having better relationships and these tools that help connect the members inside to build better relationships, then they'll feel more comfortable with raising their hand and saying, hey, I'm stuck on this thing with WordPress and I was about to call Bluehost, but does anybody want to chat with me about it? Because, I'm like gonna jump off a cliff soon because this is so stressful.
Yeah, I'm in Jay Klaus's creator lab. And the cool thing is he's like, there are a lot of creators in there who do education for other creators on specific aspects of being a creator. So if you have a question about video, there's like 3 video people. I think there are 4 lawyers in there if you want to talk IP issues and stuff. Yeah. You want to strike influencer deals, there are people in there who can help you negotiate influencer deals. So it's just this massive multi-beneficial community, and you can just really be free to say, okay, here's what I'm working on, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and you're going to get this like just response after response from people who've done this before, who have expertise in it, people who teach it. It's just a really, really powerful kind of community.
And that's the magic of community in the respect of an ecosystem. Like building an ecosystem is really saying you have a skill and I have a skill, and if I need support and I know you know that, I'm going to reach out to you and be like, Drew, I need some help here. Otherwise, and you do the same. You'd be like, hey, Deb, this is where we're at. I know you do this thing. So I think that's the power of community, is that we each have this amazing, unique life experience that we bring when we meet, whether it's in person, in an in-person actual event space or whatnot, or a virtual one. I think there's ways to leverage that as a community leader and cultivate that when you're in and growing a community. So thanks so much, Drew, for sharing all of this awesome insights about Burb and about how you work with people. For anybody who's curious about learning more about you, what's the best place? Where is the best place for them to go?
So you can go to learn more about Burb, burb.co. You can find me on Twitter. That's usually the place where I'm spending way too much time until Elon kills it. At Drew Dill, DIL, DREWDIL is my handle. And yeah, happy to chat with folks there as well.
Cool. All right, Drew. Well, thank you again so much for joining us on the Community Strategy Podcast. For everybody listening, thanks for joining in. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend or fellow community builder or creator. Until the next time, I hope you're finding calm in this day, evening, afternoon. Today it's Wednesday at 5:22 p.m. But find calm until the next time. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye. Hi, this is Deb Shell, and I'm super excited to let you know that I'm writing a book. Yes, it might not be a big deal for you, but it is a big deal for me. As I work through writing the Creator to Community Builder book, I've decided to launch a crowdfunding campaign, and I'm super excited to share with you that this is where I'm asking you for your help. I need to reach $5,000, and at this moment, we've raised about $1,110. So thank you so much for all of the people who have
supported this project to this point. I wanted to let you know with updating you today that I'm extending this campaign to the end of the year. So by December 31st, my goal is to raise $5,000 for this book. The estimates are about $10,000 of cost of publishing, printing, a limited amount of copies, and paying for a designer. So I just started reconnecting with our book designer. He's going to be getting me some proposals next week, and I'm going to start with a new cover design for you, hopefully before the end of the year. So that's my update for today. Thank you for supporting me so far. If you haven't supported this project yet, please go to the show notes and check out the I Fund Woman crowdfunding campaign for the new book, Creator to Community Builder. I'm super excited. Thanks so much for all who've supported.